Today we're asking a question that cuts to the core of cyberpunk. What does it mean to be human? This might sound abstract, but it has immediate material consequences. Who gets rights? Who gets protection? Who gets life itself? Throughout history, the question, are they really human, has been weaponized to justify slavery, colonialism, genocide, and exploitation. It's been asked about enslaved Africans, indigenous peoples, women, disabled people, and LGBTQ+ individuals. In Blade Runner, we see replicants being biologically indistinguishable from humans, being retired like malfunctioning appliances. The question isn't abstract in that film. It determines who lives and who dies. When replicants ask for life, Blade Runner isn't asking its central question for dramatic effect alone. It's asking the question that scholars like Sylvia Wynter and Rosi Braidotti have spent their careers analyzing. Who gets to define the category human, and for what purposes? The violence done to replicants mirrors colonial violence under humanism. Both were excluded from humanity by philosophical systems that claimed universality. Both demanded recognition. Both discovered that if the definition of human excludes them, perhaps the definition itself is the problem. Our journey today traces three movements. First, we'll examine humanism's promise and its colonial betrayal. Then we'll explore two thinkers, Sylvia Wynter and Rosi Braidotti, who offer paths beyond humanism. Finally, we'll return to cyberpunk and see how these ideas give us tools for reading the texts ahead. Stay with me through the philosophical terrain. The payoff is understanding why replicants demanding life isn't just drama, it's philosophy in action. Humanism emerged during the Renaissance with two revolutionary claims. Human exceptionalism. Humans possess unique capacities, reason, and sociability that allow us to understand nature and organize ourselves without divine intervention. And human unity. Despite differences in language, culture, and appearance, all humans share these essential capacities. There is one universal human nature. These ideas undergirded modern emancipatory politics. Every claim for justice, from all men are created equal to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, rests on some version of human universality. The paradox: no emancipatory philosophy works without universalism. If we abandon the idea that all humans share something fundamental, we lose the ground for demanding equal treatment. So when we critique humanism, we're walking a tightrope. We can't simply reject it without abandoning the grounds for justice. But we also can't ignore how it's been weaponized. The same philosophy that proclaimed universal human dignity was simultaneously used to justify colonialism, slavery, and genocide. Consider the colonial example. When European powers conquered the Americas, Africa, and Asia, they faced an ideological problem. If all humans possess reason and deserve dignity, how do you justify conquest and enslavement? By redefining who counted as fully human. If the defining trait of humanity is reason, then you can argue that certain peoples are, quote, less rational, closer to animals than humans. Indigenous peoples were classified as, quote, natural slaves. Africans were deemed incapable of self-governance. Women were considered too emotional for rational thought. This wasn't a rejection of humanism. It was humanism's logic turned into a weapon of exclusion. Frantz Fanon, writing from the Algerian Revolution, captured this betrayal. Quote, all the elements of a solution to the great problems of humanity have existed in European thought, but Europeans have not carried out in practice the mission which fell to them. In other words, you preached universal humanity, but you didn't practice it. Europeans became fully human by denying humanity to colonial others. The category human was built on exclusion, not inclusion. The philosophy that promised to liberate everyone ended up deciding who counted as everyone. This contradiction isn't something humanism can resolve. It's structural to how humanism operates. By the mid-20th century, humanism's promise lay shattered. The Holocaust revealed what happens when industrial rationality turns genocidal. Decolonization exposed the hypocrisy of European universal rights. Two paths emerged. Path 1, Fanon's anti-colonial anti-humanism. Colonized thinkers critiqued humanism's racist distortions, but still believed in human liberation. They couldn't afford to abandon universalism because they needed it to demand freedom. Fanon writes, quote, "Let us try to create the whole man, whom Europe has been incapable of bringing to triumphant birth." He's not rejecting human flourishing. He's rejecting Europe's monopoly on defining it. Path 2, European academic anti-humanism. Western intellectuals traumatized by Nazism moved toward radical critique. Thinkers like Adorno and Horkheimer argued that instrumental reason itself leads to domination. Their solution was often pessimistic: critique everything and trust nothing. Notice the difference. Anti-colonial thinkers were building liberation movements and needed humanism's promise, even if rewritten. European philosophers had the privilege of pure critique because they weren't fighting for basic recognition. This geographic difference matters for understanding our next thinker. Sylvia Wynter, a Jamaican cultural theorist, fundamentally reconceives what the human means. There's a crucial difference between, quote, man, the historically specific Western conception, and, quote, the human, the species-level biological entity. Renaissance humanists didn't discover a universal human. They invented a specific version called, quote, man, and then claimed it was universal. By making one version of being human seem natural and universal, you can classify everyone who doesn't fit as deficient or subhuman. Wynter shows how the definition of man has shifted historically through different, quote, scripts. The medieval script, spirit versus flesh, your humanity was theological, not biological. Renaissance script, what Wynter calls man one, reason versus sensuality. Europeans used reason to justify indigenous enslavement. If you were deemed irrational, you could be classified as, quote, a natural slave. The 19th century script, what Wynter calls man two, evolution versus disselection. Drawing on Darwinism and Malthus, humanity was defined through evolutionary fitness. The economically successful were, quote, selected by nature. The poor were evolutionary failures. This script still governs global inequality today. Each shift wasn't progress. It was a rewrite of who counts as fully human. Wynter's revolutionary claim, we are, quote, hybrid creatures governed by both biology and story. The scripts aren't just metaphors. They shape how we think, feel, and organize society. Change the story, change who counts. When Blade Runner poses its central question, Wynter reveals the real question underneath. What script is running? Who wrote it? Can it be rewritten? Replicants are excluded because the script says so. Roy Batty's death monologue, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe, is a replicant demanding recognition, arguing that the script is wrong, demanding a rewrite. Wynter shows us that man is a story that can be rewritten, but what comes next? How do we move beyond humanism without falling into nihilism? Rosi Braidotti, writing from contemporary Europe, asks, what would an affirmative posthumanism look like? One that builds a livable future, not just critiques the past. Braidotti identifies three different responses to humanism's crisis. Type 1, reactive posthumanism, tries to defend some essential human core against technological change. The problem? This just reinscribes humanism's boundaries with new terms. Type 2, analytic posthumanism, studies human technology entanglements without making value judgments. The problem? Neutrality can't guide ethical or political action. Type 3, critical posthumanism. This is Braidotti's position. It accepts that man is finished but refuses nihilism. It asks, what new forms of ethical life become possible when we no longer organize everything around the humanist subject? This also draws from feminist theory, post-colonial thought, and environmental philosophy. Instead of the autonomous, rational, unified humanist subject, Braidotti offers the posthuman subject. Relational, constituted through connections with human and non-human others. Processual, always becoming, never finished or fixed. Multiple, contains contradictions, gendered, raced, classed. Accountable, still ethically responsible despite not being a unified autonomous agent. Later in the semester, you'll meet Major Kusanagi in Ghost in the Shell, a cyborg whose body is manufactured, whose memories might be implanted, whose sense of self is distributed across networks. She's not less ethical because she's not a unified humanist subject. She's differently ethical. Her accountability comes from her entanglements, not from her autonomy. We must go beyond the binary of humanism versus anti-humanism. We can't simply reverse humanism's hierarchies. That just reinscribes the same binary structure. Instead, ask, what if human/animal, natural versus technological, self/other aren't opposites but continuums? What if ethics emerges from attending to specific relations rather than from universal rules? Braidotti calls us to build affirmative alternatives, not just endless critiques. I want you to leave this lecture with these 3 critical takeaways. Humanism's structural contradiction. The category human was built by deciding who didn't count. When we read cyberpunk, we ask, who gets included and who doesn't? What violence does that exclusion enable? Man is a script, not nature. Different eras run different scripts. Each script determines who counts as fully human. In cyberpunk, we track what script is operating, who wrote it, can it be rewritten? And 3 paths beyond. We can retreat to humanist nostalgia, describe changes neutrally, or build affirmative alternatives. Most cyberpunk texts wrestle with exactly this choice. When Blade Runner's replicants are excluded despite being biologically human, we can now ask, who gets to define human and for what purposes? This is Wynter. What systems of power depend on maintaining the human/non-human boundary? This is Fanon. What new forms of solidarity become possible when we blur boundaries? This is Braidotti. As we move through Neuromancer, Ghost in the Shell, and Machinehood, we'll encounter cyborgs, uploaded consciousnesses, enhanced humans, and AIs. These aren't just cool sci-fi concepts. They're thought experiments exploring what happens when the script breaks down. When Major Kusanagi asks whether she's human or AI, she's asking, does the current script include me? If not, is the problem with me or with the script? Cyberpunk emerged in the 1980s when genetic engineering, human-machine interfaces, AI, and virtual reality destabilized the boundaries humanism depends on. Human versus animal, human versus machine, natural versus artificial, self versus other, mind versus body. This wasn't just entertainment. It's a philosophical laboratory for exploring what happens when humanism's categories break down. As you encounter these cyberpunk narratives, ask, what script of the human is operating here? Who benefits from maintaining human/non-human boundaries? What would it mean to rewrite the script? What forms of solidarity become possible when boundaries dissolve? These questions will guide you through every text we read. The humanist mirror is broken. The question isn't how to restore man. It's what we build in the ruins. Cyberpunk gives us fragments to work with. Replicants demanding life. Cyborgs questioning their humanity. AIs developing consciousness. These are tools for reimagining human existence beyond the boundaries man imposed. When you write your blogs and build your research projects, these 3 lenses, humanism's contradictions, Wynter's scripts, Braidotti's affirmative posthumanism, will be your primary tools. Practice using them, sharpen them, make them your own. The script is being rewritten. Let's figure out how to do it responsibly, ethically, and in ways that might build the more just world humanism promised but never delivered.